Hello, in this video we are going to look at the setup of the Virtualbox virtual environment in which we can set up a number of virtual machines on a single computer. The first step in working with Virtualbox is getting the installation files, and we will find that if you would look at the link www.virtualbox.org/wiki/downloads, and since I'm using a Windows machine, I would look for this option, the 4.3.16 for Windows hosts. If you want to have the functionality of having connections to your, or being able to access your flash drives and other USB devices, you would also want to look at getting the VirtualBox extension pack, and we should always try to get the same version of the extension pack that corresponds to the version of VirtualBox that we have installed. So since I've already downloaded those pieces of software, I will go ahead and begin the installation process. We are pretty much going to be using generally the default settings, so I will click next, again next. I do not necessarily want an icon in the quick launch bar, but I will definitely want one on the desktop and also to register file association. So I will click next, and I will proceed with the installation. Now we will expect that at some point during the installation there will be resetting of the network connection, so do not be surprised if you momentarily drop out of the network that you're on or temporarily lose connection with the internet. That is absolutely normal. So we're going to start VirtualBox. And here we are. Now we also want to get the extensions. And it will ask us if we want to install, and we say yes. Scroll down to the bottom of the license agreement and agree. And so it was installed. Now we also want to check for updates, because there's a good chance that even with what we think is the latest option there, okay, so let me just restart that. And let's try that update again. Okay, so this is fine. Now we can begin actually setting up a virtual machine. And for our virtual machine installation, we are going to use an installation of Windows 2008 Server R2, and we are now going to start by creating a virtual machine. So we click on New, and we tell it it's a Windows type. The version will be Windows 2008, and I will just stick with 32-bit for the time being. I'm sorry, I will change that to 64-bit. And we will just name the machine perhaps Win 2008. And we hit next, and we can pretty much use the basic settings, the default settings that we're offered. We want to create a virtual hard drive, and we're using a Virtualbox disk image. We want it to be dynamically allocated, so even though we may have, let's say, a virtual hard drive of perhaps 50 gigabytes, it will only actually be using the bare minimum of space, and therefore you are very likely to see perhaps an installation maybe only taking up about perhaps 8 to 10 gigs. However, it simply means that because it's dynamically allocated, that virtual hard drive can increase until it reaches the size, the maximum size. So we hit next, and here we can in fact change the size. In this case, I'm going to just take it up to 50 gigs. And we will create. Okay, we are now going to continue with the setup of our virtual machine of Windows 2008 Server. So in settings, I'm switching to storage, and on my IDE controller, I'm going to add in an image, and this image will be the ISO of Windows 2008 R2, and this is it here. So we are going to attempt to start the machine, and I trust we should be able to proceed with and install it. There we go. So Windows is loading files. So we're going to click install now. So what we're going to do is install Server 2008 R2 Enterprise full installation, and we will hit next, accept the license terms, next, and we're going to do a custom install because there has not been any operating system on this virtual machine before, since we obviously just set it up. And here we are going to work on our drive options. Now notice when we set up our virtual drive, we had it at 50 gigabytes. So under drive options, we are going to make things a little bit more interesting. We are going to create two partitions, one for the operating system and one for the storage of data. So I'm going to click new, and here I'm going to select, let's say, 25,000 megabytes, which will be just under 25 gigabytes. So I'm going to apply, and we click OK, and the remaining space we are going to create again another new partition and use the full amount, and we apply. And so we are going to use partition 2 for the installation. So we hit next, and we will proceed with the installation of Windows 8. I will pause the video and return when things are a little bit nearer completion. Okay, our installation of Windows 2008 R2 server is nearing completion. The Windows files are almost fully expanded. So it's just a few more steps to completing this installation. We can expect a restart any moment now. Here we go. Can expect one more restart after this. And here is our second restart. Great. So now that the installation is more or less complete, we must now configure the server, and the first task that is going to be required before we can do anything else is to set up a password, and that password, if I can just get control of my mouse, that password must meet certain minimum complexity requirements. For example, if I entered a very simple password consisting of two lowercase letters, it will not accept it. As you will note, it must meet certain minimum length and complexity requirements. So we click OK, and we're going to try this again. This time I'm going to use at least one uppercase and at least one numeric character. And it has been accepted. We are now able to log in to our server, our newly installed server, and we can now begin any configuration tasks that are required. The first task that we are going to do is we are going to now work on the hard drive that we partitioned during the setup. You will recall that we partitioned the hard drive into two separate partitions, one for the operating system, and we are also going to now configure a second partition. So here we go to the disk management snap-in, and we are going to ensure that the second partition is available now for data storage. You would recall that we did not format it or any such other task at that time, so we are going to do that now. And here we have it. You will notice this is our operating system partition. This is a system partition that is not generally accessible to the user, and we now have the partition assigned drive letter D, and this is going to be our data partition, so we are now going to format that partition. So I'm simply going to name it data. We allow it to perform a quick format, click OK, and accept the warning. So if we now go into our Windows Explorer, we will now see that our computer, our server, has a local partition that has the operating system, and the second partition that will host the data. And you will also note, as far as the virtual machine is concerned, you will recall that we set up what appeared to be a CD drive or a virtual drive using our Windows installation ISO, and that is now being seen here as CD drive E. This completes the setup of our new Windows 2008 R2 server in a virtual machine. Thank you very much for viewing.